Looking for comics to chill the blood and trouble the soul? Keep watching. We're experiencing a bit of a horror renaissance right now. A few smart cinematic chillers have given rise to the term elevated horror, essentially scary movies with a story. But 2000 AD has been doing elevated horror for decades, giving us tales about real people in terrifying situations, as well as some more outlandish stories about bodybuilding British exorcists and vampire-werewolf liaisons. And in this video, we'll be peering between our fingers at 6 essential books that will give you the right kind of nightmares. But before we get started, remember to hit the link in the description so you can download the free 2000 AD app, complete with a stack of free comics to read right now. Holy water at the ready? Here are 6 2000 AD comics that every horror fan should read. Let's kick things off with one of the most overlooked horror stories of the last decade. John Smith and Edmund Bagwell's Cradlegrave shows us a vivid setting in the Lancastrian Ravenglade estate, renamed Cradlegrave because of the socio-economic deprivation that traps residents there their entire lives. It's the sort of horror story that feels real and small and disturbingly close. The fate of the world isn't at stake, just the weary lives of the people already struggling to get by. The spectre of violence and sense of crumbling community would be bleak enough without the addition of its vivid, sickening unpleasantness. But few stories manage to elicit the same sort of revulsion as Cradlegrave. It's so good at describing the stench of its horror, which takes place during a scorching summer and a refuse collection strike, that you can almost taste the rotten sweetness in the air. There's a stark economy to the storytelling, with pages crammed with human detail, all vividly illustrated by the late and much missed Edmund Bagwell. It's slightly reductive to call it Shane Meadows meets David Cronenberg, because this is a story that works best as a comic, and it's one that could only be told in the pages of 2000 AD, a deeply British, horrifyingly relatable tale of terror. Some of the comics on this list, much like Cradlegrave above, are cerebral reflections on modern society. Stone Island, as the intro proudly proclaims, is Resident Evil meets porridge. Writer Ian Edgington describes this as the comic equivalent of a guilty pleasure movie, a taut, high-concept setting that's an excuse for set piece after schlocky set piece. And that's not to say Stone Island isn't brilliant. There are still great characters here and devilishly bleak 2000 AD humour. It's more that you always know what you're getting. Violent dismemberment, skin-stretching body horror, and enough gushing claret to start your own craft wine company. It's essentially the comic equivalent of a survival horror game set in a bizarre penitentiary that's seen multiple sinister uses throughout its storied history. And in many respects, it's the perfect modern update to that classic old dark house story, with Victorian mansions swapped out for a monumental prison erupting from a windswept moor. In the hands of a lesser artist, this might have ended up being numbingly grim, but Simon Davis's art gives every page a sense of lurid motion, and Edgington's clear characterization softens some of the bone-snapping horror. It's not so much a horror comic as a breakneck ghost train through an abattoir. There are a few gritty, scary and shocking stories on this list, so you can consider the impeccably mannered, thigh-slapping delights of swimming in blood a palate cleanser. Devlin Waugh is a uniquely British character, and the sort of comic creation we could spend this entire entry describing. A caddish mix of Noel Coward and Terry Thomas with the body of a WWE superstar and the soul of a poet, who works as a freelance spiritual envoy for the Vatican City. He's the kind of character who's as happy knocking back mint juleps as he is punching out vampire throats, and by God, does he know how to make an entrance. Like Dredd, Waugh is compelling despite his numerous flaws. He's shallow, dangerous and sadistic, but you can't help but adore him. The lead story in the collected edition has him battling bloodsuckers in an underwater prison dubbed Aquatraz. But there are other delights here too, including Waugh's run-in with Judge Dredd himself, a brilliant battle of wills involving professional cat breeding and vintage European erotica that takes place over a customs and immigration counter. Tales of Telguuth is dedicated to its late writer Steve Moore, one of the most talented and distinct voices in the industry, and the inventor of the 2000 AD Future Shock. And that should give you some indication of what's in store for readers in this collected edition. An overwhelming display of imagination and stories that all find fresh and unexpected ways to chill the blood. It's not immediately obvious as a horror compendium. Upon first glance, you'd be forgiven for writing this off as muscular swords and sorcery stuff, but the depth of the characters and the relatability of terrors that assail them make this as chilling as anything set in an old mansion. And despite being set in a fantasy world of magic and monsters, Tales of Telguuth is a nuanced collection of stories that delight in human frailty. Many of its tales feature powerful people trying to overreach and paying a terrible price for it, and the level of raw invention here means you rarely see the twists coming. It's a showcase for exactly what made Steve Moore so talented, and proof that 2000 AD is most exhilarating when demonstrating a bold disregard for easy stereotypes. Whatever genre Tales of Telguuth is, it's terrifying. British horror has a remarkable heritage when it comes to anthologies, and who better to carry on that tradition in the comic world than Tharg the Mighty himself, even if technically speaking he's an alien. This collection of comic chillers provides a bit of social commentary in the form of stories about alien police brutality and drug use, but the headline stories are the ones that truly stand out. Necronauts is a vivacious pulp adventure that sees Harry Houdini, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Charles Fort and H.P. Lovecraft teaming up to fight an otherworldly invasion intent on enslaving mankind. A dashing, energetic story full of humour and invention that's worth the asking price just to see an elderly Conan Doyle fighting monsters with his sword cane. It's also a dizzying trip inside the complex minds of Houdini and Lovecraft, and a story that will leave you with a renewed appreciation for the term Fortean. A love like blood plays out like a gushing, violent reimagining of Romeo and Juliet, featuring vampires and werewolves, but yet again manages to feel real and relatable despite the monsters. There might be other stories out there that do the whole fur versus fang eternal war thing, but few leave quite the same mark as this. Even if folk horror wasn't experiencing a resurgence at the moment, it would be remiss to leave the excellent Thistlebone off this list. A dark, twisting detective story that has the same predatory sense of tension as an Ari Aster movie. It's a celebration of British folk horror, but one that never feels the need to explain everything or flaunt its knowledge. Instead, it feels loving and informed, full of striking, bizarre imagery and characterful art by Simon Davis that manages to convey a sense of unease without ever being melodramatic. It's a story that truly nails the feel of isolated communities and the cloying thickness of dense forest, but it still feels like a current story set in modern times. And there's a foreboding sense of everything slowly grinding towards a grim, inescapable conclusion that recalls the likes of Midsummer and St. Maud, even if the setting and characters feel distinct and unique. Like the best folktales, Thistlebone resembles an overgrown footpath. You can't quite see where it's leading, but the heavy tread of human history will make you want to follow it nonetheless. So there you go. Give this video a skeletal thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and let us know if there are any chilling 2000 AD stories we missed. Or better yet, pop your recommendations in the comments below. Have a blessed Samhain, a happy Halloween, and thank you for watching.